Hi, my name is Katherine Durkin, and today we'll be discussing cardiovascular disease, and I will be talking about the background and giving you a literary review of CVD's known risk factors. So most people take for granted a healthy heart, yet in reality, CVD is one of the world's most prevalent and expensive pandemics. According to the World Health Organization in March of 2013, CVDs are the #1 cause of death globally. On average, 16.7 million people die from CVD annually. As this chart shows, ischemic heart disease, stroke, and COPD are in the top 4 leading cause of death between 2000 and 2011. It remains a leading cause of death within the past decade. So let's get a background of CVD and actually define what CVD is. Cardiovascular disease, or heart disease, is an umbrella term used to describe a wide range of malfunctions, abnormalities, and diseases that affect the heart and or blood vessels. So I have a picture of a healthy heart, and you can see all the different muscles and blood vessels that run through your heart, and CVD can affect all these various muscles and blood vessels. And each different type of cardiovascular disease affects different parts of the heart. So let's talk about types of heart disease. This chart has various types of heart disease. Some are congenital, that means you're born with, and others are developed through atherosclerosis, which is a long time process of development for CVD. The most common form of CVD is coronary heart disease, which on average kills 385,000 Americans per year and costs around $108.9 million. So why is CVD a critical issue in the United States? It's a critical issue because cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for both male and female Americans. As the chart shows, Americans between the ages of 60 and 79 have a 70.5 chance of getting CVD. On average, 1 in 3 Americans will have CVD. That equates to around 71 million people in the United States having one or more forms of CVD. Let's talk about the extent of CVD in the United States. According to the American Heart Association, the prevalence of CVD for Americans between the ages of 60 and 79 is 70.5%. And for Americans over the age of 80, the prevalence rate for CVD is 85%, which is very significant and high. When we look at the incidence rate of CVD in the United States, for Americans between the ages of 65 and 74, the incidence rate is 44.6%. And for Americans between the ages of 75 and 84 is 49.7%. So what are the critical issues surrounding CVD? Scientists have discovered that CVD is caused by a combination of controllable and non-controllable risk factors. However, experts estimate that CVD is largely preventable. Different studies account different percentages to how much is preventable. So this chart shows risk factors that can be controlled, and the very first risk factor that you can control is high blood pressure. Other things can include high cholesterol, diabetes, tobacco use, unhealthy diet, eating a healthy diet, and exercising. Another critical issue concerning CVD, alongside with an increased public awareness, there is also increased negative risk behaviors associated with CVD, like the trend of obesity in the United States. So people are wondering why we're becoming more aware of the risk factors, negative risk factors / health behaviors associated with CVD, yet these trends are continuing to rise. So on the screen I have a picture of heart attack prevention. It says easy as ABC: avoid tobacco, become more active, and choose good nutrition. And the other campaign I have along the bottom, Coke is actually partners with the American Heart Association and will, for a certain amount of months, will actually have a separate label featuring a heart and the logo brand, so that more people will get familiar with this campaign. So all this increased awareness, and yet trends that the risk factors associated with CVD are increasing as well, led our group to our scientific process and led eventually to our research question, which is, why do Americans ignore the risk factors and behaviors that are associated or related to cardiovascular disease? So when we were trying to come up with an answer to this question, we thought about prior health knowledge and how it focused on curative medicine and often failed to focus on preventative measures for this pandemic. Therefore, we came to the theory that a large amount of the general public may not have a true understanding of primary prevention, choosing preventative health behaviors. So this slide shows us the scheme of prevention, and as we can see back here at C, this is the traditional curative medicine that takes place in the tertiary prevention, which is after a beginning of symptoms, which obviously must happen after you've already contracted an illness. So our group thought that maybe because this is where traditional medicine emphasized after the actual incurring of the illness, that the general public is not aware. If they actually focus on this primary prevention, they can limit their exposure to the illness to begin with. So this is how that ties into our theory. After we came up with this theory, we decided to come up with a hypothesis. Our group hopes to reconfirm risk factors associated with CVD so people can establish preventative action plans for cardiovascular disease. The variables that our group chose to study were unhealthy lifestyle, smoking, and physical environment. My colleagues will explain further with how these risk factors are associated with CVD.
Hello, my name is Veronica, and the factor that I am going to be dealing with is unhealthy lifestyle, being one of the factors that causes cardiovascular disease. The hypothesis that our group decided to do with unhealthy lifestyle is that cardiovascular disease is caused by an unhealthy lifestyle, including like an unhealthy diet, high LDL, cholesterol, and a lack of physical activity. Found this chart from the Center of Health Statistics data from 2007 to 2010 for the age group of 20 to 39. Basically, fast food consumed was much greater than any of the other groups. We compared that information with the data set from Chase that concluded how many times was fast food consumed in the past week. Males and females at least ate once, 25% out of like the 40. And this was all just in the state of California. We then concluded that high consumption of sodium that's actually in the fast food or like processed foods also contained a lot of saturated fat that would increase the levels of high LDL cholesterol, which is a bad cholesterol that clogs up your arteries. So we assumed that if high levels of sodium in the fast food were being consumed in a greater amount within the past couple of decades, then also the same thing would be occurring to the high levels of LDL cholesterol in adults. So this chart basically bases on the age group of 40 to 74 years old, but the trend is actually lowered 50% from the year 1976 to the year 2010. We compared this to a data set from 2005 of Chase of how many individuals were actually diagnosed with having high blood cholesterol. And if you see in the red is basically both male and female were found to have no high blood cholesterol, and like less than 30% were found to be diagnosed with having high blood cholesterol. So then we kind of questioned as to like how is it that LDL is not being increased when there's a high consumption of sodium and saturated fat that's being consumed with the fast food? We recognize that LDL cholesterol is not only influenced badly, but it can also be influenced in a good way that decreases the amount of LDL. Cholesterol can be affected in a way that if an individual exercises or includes physical activities in their life, they can decrease the amount of LDL. So based on the American Heart Association, they recommend an individual to exercise at least 150 minutes per week of moderate exercise, which is a total of like 2 hours and 30 minutes, or 25 minutes per week of vigorous exercise, which is like an hour and 15 minutes. As to how much individuals in the Fresno County and San Joaquin Valley actually exercise, and we actually concluded that both the male and female at 45% actually included physical activity as part of their lifestyle, which would then actually be like a big decrease in LDL. With all this information, we concluded that based on the data information that was evaluated throughout this PowerPoint, there does seem to be a correlation between high levels of sodium consumed, especially through the fast food, and the increase of LDL cholesterol and the heart disease. However, based on the data retrieved, regular physical activity, or like exercise, excluding walking, seem to be the alternative way to lower LDL cholesterol and the chance of developing heart disease. We also focused on the factor of smoking, the use of tobacco, being a factor of cardiovascular disease. Our hypothesis for this was that smoking or the use of tobacco is a factor that contributes to the cardiovascular disease. Or just cut this part, Kate. Our hypothesis for this factor is that smoking or the use of tobacco is a factor that contributes to cardiovascular disease. According to Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, abbreviated MMWR, in 2008, about 443,000 U.S. deaths attributable to each year were caused by cigarette smoking. That portion is this kind of brown spot right here, also like stroke, which was a total of 126,000 deaths. For stroke, it was 15,900. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, smoking is a leading cause of cardiovascular disease, causing around 25,000 deaths per year. Let me just start over. Cut this part too. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, smoking is a leading cause of cardiovascular disease, causing around 25,000 deaths per year from the heart and circulatory disease. American Council on Science and Health in 1996 observed cut this part. The American Council on Science and Health in 1996 observed the rising heart rate associated with tobacco use and concluded that the heart rate can increase by 30% during the first 10 minutes of smoking. So that's basically the amount of time that it takes for a person to